You did not choose to watch this video. You think you did. You think you saw the thumbnail and made a decision, weighed the options, considered your time, clicked because you wanted to click. You think the click was yours, your choice, your will, your decision. But quantum mechanics says something different. Quantum mechanics says the click was determined before you were born, or quantum mechanics says the click was random. A dice roll in your neurons, a quantum fluctuation that tipped the balance. Not choice, chance, not will, randomness, not you deciding, the universe deciding for you. Either way, you did not choose. This is the problem of free will, the oldest problem in philosophy, the most personal problem in physics, the most dangerous problem in theology, the problem that determines whether your life is yours or whether you are a passenger in a body that was always going to do what it does. Whether the feeling of choosing is real, or whether it is the most sophisticated illusion in the universe, an illusion so perfect that every human who has ever lived has been fooled by it. 7 billion people on this planet right now. Every single one of them convinced they are making choices. Every single one of them experiencing the sensation of deciding, and every single one of them possibly wrong, including you, right now, reading these words, thinking you chose to read them, feeling certain that you could stop reading at any moment, that the next second is open, that the future is yours to determine. What if it is not? Physics has two things to say about your choices. Both are devastating, and they contradict each other, which makes the situation not better but worse, because the contradiction does not create space for free will. The contradiction eliminates it from two different directions simultaneously. The first is determinism. Classical physics, the physics of Newton and Laplace, says the universe is a machine. Every particle in the universe has a position and a velocity. The laws of physics determine how those positions and velocities change over time. Given the exact state of the universe at any moment, the laws of physics determine the exact state at every future moment. Every particle, every atom, every molecule, every neuron in your brain, every electrical signal in every synapse, every thought you will ever think, every decision you will ever make. All of it determined by the initial conditions of the universe and the laws of physics. All of it fixed from the moment of the Big Bang. All of it inevitable. Pierre-Simon Laplace said it in 1814. An intelligence which at a given moment knew all the forces that animate nature and the position of every object in the universe could condense into a single formula the movements of the greatest bodies and the lightest atoms. For such an intelligence, nothing would be uncertain, and the future, just like the past, would be present before its eyes. Laplace's demon. An entity that knows the position and velocity of every particle in the universe and can calculate the entire future, every event, every storm, every war, every love affair, every heartbreak, every moment of inspiration and every moment of despair, every thought you will ever think, every word you will ever speak, every choice you will ever make, already calculated, already determined, already fixed, already inevitable from the first microsecond after the Big Bang. Think about what this means for you specifically. The atoms in your brain right now were forged in stars that exploded billions of years ago. Those atoms drifted through space, assembled into a planet, were incorporated into food that your mother ate, were built into your body, were arranged into neurons. Those neurons are firing right now in patterns that produce your thoughts. And every firing, every pattern, every thought was determined by the positions and velocities of particles at the moment of the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago, before the Earth existed, before the Sun existed, before your galaxy existed. The thought you are having right now was determined then, was inevitable then. was written into the initial conditions of the universe before there were stars to forge the atoms that would one day think it. In Laplace's universe, there is no free will, cannot be. Your brain is made of atoms. Atoms obey the laws of physics. The laws of physics are deterministic. Therefore, your brain is deterministic. Therefore, your thoughts are deterministic. Therefore, your choices are deterministic. Therefore, you have no choice. You do what the atoms do, and the atoms do what the laws of physics dictate. And the laws of physics were set at the beginning of the universe, before you existed, before the Earth existed, before the solar system existed. Your every thought, your every choice, your every action determined 13.8 billion years before you were born by the initial conditions of a universe that did not know you were coming and did not plan for your arrival. This is the clockwork universe. Wind it up and it plays. Every tick determined by the previous tick. Every gear turning because the previous gear turned. No spontaneity, no creativity, no genuine choice. Just mechanism playing out, endlessly, inevitably, and you are part of the mechanism, a very complex part, a part that generates the illusion of choosing, but a part nonetheless, a gear, a cog, a piece of the machine that thinks it is free because the machine is too complex for the piece to see the mechanism that controls it. Then quantum mechanics arrived and destroyed determinism, or seemed to. In 1927, Werner Heisenberg discovered the uncertainty principle. You cannot know both the position and the velocity of a particle at the same time, not because your instruments are not precise enough, because the particle does not have both a definite position and a definite velocity at the same time. The universe is fundamentally uncertain at the quantum level, not approximately uncertain, fundamentally. Irreducibly, the uncertainty is not in your measurement, the uncertainty is in reality itself. This means Laplace's demon is impossible, not just practically impossible, because you could never measure every particle, theoretically impossible, fundamentally impossible. Even with perfect instruments, even with infinite computing power, even with godlike knowledge, you cannot predict the future, because the particles do not have definite states to know. They exist in superposition, in probability clouds, in quantum uncertainty. The electron does not have a position until measured. The photon does not have a polarization until detected. The radioactive atom does not have a decay time until it decays. The future is not determined by the present, because the present is not definite. The clockwork is broken, the gears are fuzzy, the mechanism is probabilistic. The universe does not tick with certainty, it ticks with probability. Newton's clockwork shattered by Heisenberg's uncertainty. The deterministic universe replaced by the probabilistic universe, the machine replaced by the dice. And for a moment this seemed like salvation. If the universe is not deterministic, then maybe free will is possible. Maybe the quantum uncertainty in your neurons creates space for genuine choice. Maybe the fuzziness of the gears is exactly where free will lives, in the gap between certainty and probability, in the space where the universe does not determine the outcome, in the quantum uncertainty that breaks the clockwork and allows something new, something spontaneous, something unpredetermined, something free. Many people still believe this. Many scientists still hope for this, that quantum indeterminacy is the mechanism of free will, that the uncertainty principle is where choice lives. It is not, and here is why. It is not, and here is why. Randomness is not freedom. Think about this carefully, because the distinction is critical. If your decisions are not determined by prior causes, but instead result from random quantum fluctuations in your neurons, then your decisions are random, not chosen, random. You did not decide. A quantum dice roll decided. The electron in your neuron went left instead of right, not because you willed it, not because you chose it, not because some essential you exerted causal force on the electron, but because the wave function collapsed randomly in that direction. Your choice was not determined. True, but it was not free either. It was random, and random is not the same as free. A coin flip is not a choice. A quantum fluctuation is not a decision. A dice roll is not an act of will. Think about what freedom would actually require. Freedom would require that you, the conscious agent, the self, the will, the thing you call, I could influence the outcome, could steer the quantum collapse, could choose which way the electron goes. But there is no mechanism for this, no equation in quantum mechanics that says conscious will affect collapse probability. No variable in the Schrödinger equation that represents choice. No term in any physical law that allows a mind to push a particle in a preferred direction. The particle goes where probability sends it, not where you send it. Probability is not you. Probability is mathematics, and mathematics does not care what you want. Replacing determinism with randomness does not give you free will. It gives you a different kind of unfreedom, not the unfreedom of the machine, the unfreedom of the dice, not the prison of inevitability, the prison of chance. In one prison, the warden knows exactly what you will do tomorrow. In the other prison, even the warden does not know. But in neither prison are you free. In neither prison do you choose. In one, you are puppet. In the other, you are dice. Neither is the thing you experience as choosing. This is the dilemma, the impossible dilemma that physics presents, the dilemma that has no exit. If the universe is deterministic, your choices are predetermined. If the universe is random, your choices are random. In neither case are your choices free. Determinism eliminates free will by making your future inevitable. Randomness eliminates free will by making your future arbitrary. The clockwork universe and the dice universe are both prisons. Different prisons, different architecture, different walls, but prisons. And physics offers no third option. No mechanism by which a conscious agent could influence quantum outcomes in a way that is neither determined nor random, but genuinely chosen. No equation that describes choice, no law that accounts for will. No variable in any physical theory that represents the thing you experience as deciding. The physicist Sean Carroll puts it bluntly. If someone claims that human decision-making cannot be captured in terms of the known laws of physics, they are making a claim that can in principle be tested. And as far as we know, the claim is false. The laws of physics are sufficient to account for everything your brain does, including deciding, including choosing, including the feeling of freedom. The laws do not need a ghost, do not need a soul, do not need a will, do not need you. They need atoms obeying equations. And that is exactly what your brain is. Atoms obeying equations. Very many atoms, very complex equations, but atoms and equations nonetheless. Sam Harris, the neuroscientist and philosopher, goes further. Free will is not merely an illusion. It is worse than an illusion. The concept does not even make sense. What would it mean for your will to be free? Free from what? From your brain? Your brain is you. Free from the laws of physics? You are made of physics. Free from causation? Then your actions are random. There is no coherent account of what free means when applied to will. The concept dissolves under analysis. What remains is the feeling of freedom. And feelings are not evidence. Feelings are products of neural computation, products of the very brain whose determinism or randomness eliminates the freedom of the feeling advertises. And the neuroscience is worse. In 1983, Benjamin Libet conducted an experiment that shook the foundations of our understanding of human agency. An experiment so disturbing that philosophers and neuroscientists have been arguing about it for 4 decades and have not yet recovered from it. He asked subjects to perform a simple action. Flex your wrist whenever you feel like it, whenever you want. No external trigger, no cue. Just decide on your own and move. While they did this, he measured 2 things: the electrical activity in their brain using EEG, and the moment they reported feeling the urge to move, the conscious intention, the "I want to move now" moment, the moment of apparent choice. What he found was a bomb thrown into the center of human self-understanding. The brain activity, the readiness potential, began 550 milliseconds before the action. The conscious intention, the feeling of choosing, was reported 200 milliseconds before the action. The brain started preparing the movement 350 milliseconds before the person was aware of deciding to move. 350 milliseconds, more than a third of a second. The decision was made by the brain before the person knew they were deciding. The feeling of choosing came after the brain had already chosen. The conscious experience of free will was not the cause of the action. It was the report of an action already initiated by unconscious neural processes. The will came after the deed, not before, after. The sequence was not, "I decide, then my brain acts." The sequence was, "My brain acts, then I feel like I decided." Libet's experiment has been replicated, refined, and extended for 4 decades. In 2008, Chun Seong-soon and colleagues using fMRI found that brain activity predicting a decision could be detected up to 10 seconds before the subject reported awareness of the decision. 10 seconds. The brain knew what you were going to do 10 seconds before you thought you decided to do it. Your sense of choosing was not the beginning of the action. It was the end of a process that began in your unconscious brain 10 seconds earlier. Your will was not free. Your will was late. John Dylan Haynes replicated and extended these findings, used machine learning to decode brain activity and predict decisions before subjects were aware of making them. The predictions were not perfect, not 100%, but significantly above chance. The brain contains information about your future decision before you are aware of deciding. The information is there, in the neural patterns, in the unconscious processes, before you know, before you choose, before the thing you call will has any involvement at all. This does not prove free will is illusion. The experiments have been criticized. The decisions studied are trivial. Flex your wrist, press a button, not the complex deliberative decisions that matter in life. The timing measurements depend on subjective reports that might not be accurate. The brain activity might represent preparation, not decision, might represent readiness rather than determination. The criticism has force. But the direction of the evidence is clear, and the direction points away from free will as traditionally understood, away from the idea that conscious will initiates action, away from the idea that you decide and then your brain executes. The evidence points toward the brain deciding and then informing you, toward consciousness as narrator, not author, toward the self as commentator, not commander, toward the devastating possibility that the feeling of choosing is exactly that, a feeling, not a cause, not a force, not an agent, a feeling, generated by the brain after the brain has already decided, a story the brain tells itself about decisions the brain has already made. And now connect the neuroscience to the physics. Your brain is made of atoms. The atoms obey quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is either deterministic at the deepest level or random. The neuroscience says your brain makes decisions before you are aware of them. The unconscious processes that initiate action are themselves physical processes governed by physical law. Put it all together. Your decisions are made by unconscious neural processes that you do not control. Those processes are governed by quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is either determined or random. Therefore, your decisions are either determined or random. In neither case are they free. In neither case is the conscious experience of choosing anything more than after-the-fact narration. A story about a process that was already complete before the story began. A confabulation, a retrospective illusion of authorship imposed on events that the author did not author. You are not the driver. You are the passenger who thinks they are driving because the car happens to go where they would have chosen to go. The car goes where physics sends it. You narrate the journey as if you planned the route, but you did not plan the route. The route was planned by atoms, by quantum mechanics, by 13.8 billion years of causal history that neither knows nor cares that you exist. This is what physics says about your free will. This is what neuroscience says about your choices. This is the scientific case against the thing you experience as the most intimate and undeniable aspect of your existence. Your sense of agency, your feeling of authorship, your experience of being the one who decides. The science says it might be illusion, sophisticated illusion, compelling illusion, undeniable from the inside, but illusion nonetheless. But there is another voice in this conversation, a voice that has been speaking for thousands of years about fate and free will and the relationship between human choice and cosmic design, the voice of theology. And what theology says about your choices is not what you expect, because every major theological tradition has wrestled with this exact problem, not in the language of quantum mechanics, not with the tools of neuroscience, but with the same question. The exact same question. Are your choices yours, or are they determined by something beyond you, something that decided before you were born what you would do and when you would do it and how you would do it, something that set the initial conditions not of the universe but of your soul? Islam has a word for it, qadar, divine decree, one of the 6 pillars of Islamic faith, not optional belief, required belief. The belief that everything that happens was written by God before creation. Before the universe existed, God wrote in Allah al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet, everything that would occur until the day of judgment. Every event, every breath, every heartbeat, every thought, every choice, every falling leaf, every forming raindrop, every firing neuron, written, fixed, predetermined by God. Before you existed, before the universe existed. Before time itself existed, the Prophet Muhammad said the pens have been lifted and the pages have dried, meaning fate is already written, already fixed, already determined. Nothing you do changes what was written. Nothing you choose alters the decree. The ink is dry. The book is closed. Your story is finished before it begins. And the Quran says it explicitly. No disaster strikes upon the earth or among yourselves, except that it is in a register before we bring it into being. Quran 57-22. Before we bring it into being. Before. The event was written before it happened. The choice was recorded before it was made. The decision existed in the preserved tablet before the neurons that would execute it were formed, before the brain that would contain the neurons was conceived, before the planet that would sustain the brain was born. Your life pre-written in divine register, your choices pre-recorded in cosmic ledger, not metaphorically, literally. This is orthodox Islamic theology. Christianity has predestination. Augustine taught it. Calvin systematized it. Reformed theology built a civilization on it. Calvin taught that God, before the foundation of the world, elected some to salvation and others to damnation, not based on what they would do, not based on their choices, not based on their merit or their faith or their works, based on God's sovereign will alone, unconditional election. Your destination, heaven or hell, was determined before you were born. Before you chose anything, before you did anything, before the earth was formed, God decided, and God's decision cannot be altered by your will, because your will is itself part of the creation God controls. You cannot choose to be saved because you cannot choose anything. Your will is bound to sin if you are not elect, freed by grace if you are. But the freeing was God's choice, not yours, never yours. Hinduism has karma, not karma as popular culture understands it, not karma as simple reward and punishment, not karma as the universe giving you what you deserve, karma as the deterministic chain of cause and effect that binds the soul to the cycle of rebirth, samsara. Every action produces samskara, impressions, tendencies, dispositions that shape future action. Every consequence determines future actions. Every future action produces more consequences, more impressions, more tendencies. The chain extends through lifetimes, through thousands of lifetimes, through millions, and the chain is unbroken, every link forged by the previous link, every life shaped by the previous life, every choice in this life conditioned by the accumulated karma of all previous lives. You are not choosing freely. You are expressing the accumulated tendencies of countless previous existences. Your personality, your preferences, your inclinations, your deepest desires are not original. They are inherited from yourself, from previous versions of yourself, stretching back to beginningless time. 3 traditions, 3 continents, 3 millennia, all arriving at the same conclusion as quantum mechanics and neuroscience. Your choices are not free, are not yours, are not the product of an independent will that stands outside the causal chain and makes genuine decisions. Your choices are the product of prior causes, physical causes in neuroscience, quantum causes in physics, divine causes in theology, karmic causes in Hinduism. The mechanism differs. The conclusion is identical. You are not the author of your story. You are a character in a story written by something else. By physics, by God, by karma, by the initial conditions of whatever system you find yourself in. And yet, every one of these traditions also insists on human responsibility. The contradiction is staggering. Islam says your choices are predetermined by God and that you are responsible for your choices. That God wrote your fate and that you will be judged for your fate. That the ink is dry and that you must still choose rightly. Christianity says God elected the saved before creation and that you must choose to accept salvation. That grace is irresistible and that you must not resist. That God determines everything and that you are accountable for everything. Hinduism says karma determines your circumstances, your tendencies, your deepest inclinations, and that you must act rightly within those circumstances. That the chain is unbroken and that you must break it. That your choices are conditioned by previous lives and that you must make better choices. The contradiction is not hidden, not buried in obscure texts, not the product of confused theologians who did not notice the logical problem. The contradiction is explicit, acknowledged, discussed at length, debated for millennia, and ultimately embraced, not resolved, embraced. Every tradition that has seriously confronted the relationship between fate and free will has concluded that both are real, that both must be affirmed, that the contradiction is not error but mystery, not problem but truth, too large for human logic to contain. And physics arrives at the same contradiction. Quantum mechanics is the most successful scientific theory in history, and it cannot tell you whether you have free will. The equations do not resolve the question. The experiments do not settle it. The interpretations disagree. Some interpretations say everything is determined. Some say everything is random. Some say the question is meaningless. None say you are free in the way you experience freedom. And yet every physicist, every neuroscientist, every determinist philosopher acts as if they are free, makes choices, deliberates, plans, decides, takes responsibility, blames others, praises others, lives as if choice is real, even while arguing that choice is illusion. This is not hypocrisy. This is the same mystery that theology encountered, the mystery of a reality that contains both fate and freedom, both determination and responsibility, both mechanism and meaning, both equations and choices, the mystery that will not resolve into one side or the other, the mystery that demands you hold both, that requires you to live in the contradiction, that insists on both the science that denies your freedom and the experience that affirms it. In part 2, we go deeper into the quantum mechanics, into superdeterminism, the most terrifying interpretation of quantum mechanics you have never heard of. The interpretation that says, not only are your choices predetermined, but even your choice of what experiments to perform is predetermined. That says the universe conspires at the deepest level to ensure that you never discover whether you are free. That says Bell's theorem, the most important theorem in physics, might have a loophole. And the loophole swallows everything. Everything, including the possibility of ever knowing whether the loophole exists. We explore the Conway-Kochen free will theorem, the mathematical proof that if particles have even a tiny amount of unpredictability, then human beings have free will. The theorem that connects the freedom of electrons to the freedom of minds, that says if the universe is not superdetermined, then you are genuinely free. That your freedom and the particle's freedom are the same freedom. And we confront the block universe, Einstein's universe. The universe where past, present, and future exist simultaneously, where time is not flowing river but frozen lake, where your birth and your death and every moment between them coexist in a four-dimensional block of space-time, where the question is free will, an illusion becomes, is time itself an illusion, where your entire life, every moment, every breath, every thought, already exists, already written, already fixed, not by God, not by karma, by geometry, by the shape of space-time itself. Your fate inscribed not in a preserved tablet, but in the mathematics of the universe. Your destiny written not in divine ink, but in equations. And the equations are dry, and the pages do not turn, because there are no pages, just a block, eternal, complete, containing everything that was and is and ever will be, including you, including this moment, including the next. There is an interpretation of quantum mechanics that most physicists refuse to discuss. Not because it is wrong, because it is too disturbing, too complete, too airtight. An interpretation that does not merely deny free will, but denies the possibility of ever discovering whether free will exists. An interpretation that seals the prison from inside and swallows the key. An interpretation that says the universe is not just deterministic, but conspiratorially deterministic. That reality has been rigged since the Big Bang to prevent you from ever finding out that it is rigged. It is called superdeterminism. And once you understand it, you will never think about your choices the same way again. To understand superdeterminism, you must first understand Bell's theorem, the most important theorem in physics. The theorem that John Bell, a quiet physicist from Belfast, proved in 1,964 inches, a 2-page paper that changed everything we know about the nature of reality. Bell proved that if quantum mechanics is correct, then reality must be either non-local or not deterministic. Either particles communicate faster than light, violating everything Einstein believed about the universe, or they do not have predetermined values, and genuine randomness exists at the fundamental level, either spooky action at a distance or real dice. Bell gave us a test, an inequality, a mathematical boundary. If hidden variables determine particle behavior, if Einstein was right, if the clockwork universe is real, the inequality holds. The numbers stay below the threshold. If quantum mechanics is right, if genuine randomness exists, if the clockwork is broken, the inequality is violated. The numbers exceed the threshold. Alan Aspect performed the test. The inequality was violated. Quantum mechanics won. Hidden variables lost. Reality is either non-local or random, and most physicists concluded that local determinism is dead, that the universe is not a clockwork, that genuine randomness exists at the quantum level. But Bell's theorem has an assumption, a hidden assumption that almost no one talks about. The assumption is that the experimenter is free to choose what measurement to perform. That when Aspect decides to measure the photon's polarization at 0 degrees or 30 degrees or 60 degrees, he is making a genuine choice. That his decision about which measurement to perform is independent of the particle's hidden state. That the experimenter and the experiment are not correlated before the measurement. That the choice of measurement is free. This assumption is called measurement independence, or statistical independence, or, more colloquially, free will. Bell's theorem assumes the experimenter has free will, and if the experimenter does not have free will, then Bell's theorem does not apply. The inequality need not be violated. Hidden variables can explain everything. Local determinism survives. The clockwork universe is restored. Everything is predetermined, including the experimenter's choice of what to measure. This is superdeterminism. The idea that the initial conditions of the universe were set up so that the experimenter's choice of measurement and the particle's hidden state are correlated, not because the particle communicates with the experimenter, not because of spooky action, because both the particle and the experimenter were determined by the same initial conditions at the Big Bang. The particle's state and the experimenter's brain state are both consequences of the same primordial cause. They are correlated the way two branches of the same tree are correlated, not because one communicates with the other, because both grew from the same root. Gerard Hooft, the Nobel laureate in physics, is the most prominent defender of superdeterminism. He argues that the universe is fundamentally deterministic at a level deeper than quantum mechanics. That quantum randomness is not real randomness, but apparent randomness arising from deterministic underlying dynamics that we cannot access. That the uncertainty principle is epistemic, not ontological. We are uncertain. Nature is not. Everything is determined. Everything, including what experiments you choose to perform, including what questions you choose to ask, including what you think about superdeterminism right now. The physicist Sabine Hossenfelder has also argued for superdeterminism. She points out that measurement independence is an assumption, not a proven fact, that nothing in physics proves the experimenter's choices are independent of the system being measured, that assuming free will in order to prove results about the physical world is circular if you then use those results to draw conclusions about free will. You cannot use Bell's theorem to prove randomness exists if Bell's theorem assumes the experimenter is free, and the question is whether the experimenter is free. the logic is circular. The conclusion is assumed in the premise. Think about what superdeterminism means, not just for physics, for you, for your experience of being alive, for everything you have ever believed about yourself. If superdeterminism is correct, then everything you have ever done was determined at the Big Bang. Every thought, every feeling, every decision, every moment of apparent choice, every moment of hesitation that felt like genuine deliberation, every moment of regret that assumed you could have chosen differently, all of it. The inevitable unfolding of initial conditions set 13.8 billion years ago. You did not choose your career. The Big Bang chose it. You did not choose your partner. The initial conditions chose them. You did not choose to be kind or cruel, compassionate or indifferent, brave or cowardly. The positions of particles at the birth of the universe chose for you. Before you existed, before the Earth existed, before the atoms that would become your brain were forged in dying stars, the choice was already made by physics, by initial conditions, by the mathematical consequences of a configuration that predates everything, and not just your actions. Your attempts to test whether your actions are free are also determined. The experiments you design to test determinism are determined. The results you obtain are determined. Your interpretation of the results is determined. Your belief about whether you are free is determined. Your reaction to reading about superdeterminism right now is determined. The thought you are having about superdeterminism as you read this sentence was determined at the Big Bang, was inevitable, was written into the initial conditions, was as fixed as the orbit of Mercury around the Sun. The universe does not just control what you do, it controls what you think about what you do. It controls your investigation of whether it controls you. It controls the very thoughts you are having right now about whether it controls your thoughts. It controls your sense of indignation at being controlled. It controls your attempt to reject the idea. It even controls your decision to stop thinking about it and move on. This is the terrifying completeness of superdeterminism. It is unfalsifiable not because it is unscientific, but because it absorbs every possible counterargument into itself. Any evidence against superdeterminism was itself determined. Any experiment that seems to prove randomness was determined to produce that result. Any intuition that you are free was determined to feel that way. There is no outside, no escape hatch, no experiment you could perform that would distinguish a superdetermined universe from a free one. Because in a superdetermined universe, the experiments you choose to perform are themselves determined. You are trapped inside a system that controls not just your behavior, but your epistemology, not just what you do, but what you can know, not just your actions, but your access to truth itself. Most physicists reject superdeterminism, not because they can prove it wrong. They cannot. Nobody can. That is precisely the problem. But because accepting it makes science impossible. If the experimenter's choices are correlated with the system being measured, then no experiment is trustworthy. Every result might be artifact of the conspiracy between experimenter and system. Every measurement might be corrupted by the predetermined correlation between the measurer and the measured. Every control group might not be genuinely independent. Every randomized trial might not be genuinely randomized. Science depends on the assumption that the experimenter can make independent choices about what to measure. Without that assumption, the entire edifice of experimental science collapses. Not just quantum physics, all of experimental science. Every drug trial, every psychology experiment, every astronomical observation, every chemistry measurement, every controlled experiment in every field assumes the controls are genuinely chosen. Superdeterminism says they are not. says they never were, says the correlation between experimenter and experiment was baked into the universe at the Big Bang. And if that is true, then every experimental result in the history of science is potentially an artifact of cosmic conspiracy rather than a genuine discovery about nature. This is why most physicists refuse to discuss superdeterminism. Not because it is wrong, because if it is right, then physics itself cannot determine whether it is right. The question is permanently undecidable from within the system. And we are within the system, always, permanently, inescapably. But there is a theorem that pushes back, a mathematical proof that connects your freedom to the freedom of particles. A theorem so important and so underappreciated that most people have never heard of it. The Conway-Kochen free will theorem, published in 2006 by John Conway, the great mathematician, and Simon Kochen, the logician, and what it proves is extraordinary. The theorem says this: if the behavior of certain particles is not determined by the entire history of the universe before the measurement, then the experimenter's choice of measurement is also not determined. And conversely, if the experimenter's choice is not determined, then the particle's behavior is not determined. Freedom is shared, linked, bound together by mathematical necessity. If particles are free, then you are free. If you are free, then particles are free. The freedom of the electron and the freedom of the human are the same freedom, connected, inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. You cannot claim free will for yourself while denying it to the electron, and you cannot deny free will for yourself while granting it to the electron. The mathematics forbids it. The proof is rigorous, mathematical, based on 3 axioms that are experimentally confirmed. The spin axiom, based on the quantum mechanical prediction for spin, 1 particles, which says that when you measure the squared spin in 3 orthogonal directions, the results must sum to a specific value. The twin axiom, based on entanglement correlations, which says that entangled particles, when measured in the same direction, always give the same result. And the min axiom, which is measurement independence, the assumption that the experimenter's choice is not determined by prior events, not by the particle's hidden state, not by the history of the universe, not by the Big Bang. Given these 3 axioms, Conway and Kochen prove that the particle's response to the measurement is not a function of any information available before the measurement. The particle cannot have decided in advance what result to give. The result is genuinely new, not determined by anything in the prior history of the universe. The particle is genuinely free, not random in the way a coin flip is random, free in the sense that its behavior is not a function of prior causes. It does something that nothing in the universe's history predetermined it to do. Conway was very careful about the language. He did not say particles have consciousness, did not say particles deliberate, did not say particles make decisions in the way humans make decisions. He said something more precise and more radical. He said that if you define free will as behavior not determined by prior history, then particles have free will in exactly the same sense that humans claim to have it. The same definition applies to both. The same freedom or the same lack of freedom applies to both. If you are a clockwork machine, then so is the electron, and quantum mechanics is wrong. If the electron is genuinely free, then so are you, and your choices are as undetermined as the electron's spin. There is no middle ground, no position from which you can say the electron is free, but I am not. Or, I am free, but the electron is determined. Freedom is universal, or freedom does not exist. Conway and Kochen prove this with the same mathematical rigor that Pythagoras proved his theorem. It is not opinion. It is not interpretation. It is proof. But notice the assumption, MIN, measurement independence. the assumption that the experimenter is free to choose what to measure. This is exactly what superdeterminism denies. If superdeterminism is correct, then min is false, and the Conway-Kochen theorem does not apply. The particle is not free. You are not free. Everything is determined. And the theorem, beautiful as it is, proves nothing, because its foundational assumption is the very thing in question. Conway-Kochen proves that freedom exists if and only if superdeterminism is false. Freedom and the absence of cosmic conspiracy are logically equivalent. You are free if and only if the universe is not rigged, and superdeterminism cannot be tested, because testing it requires the very freedom it denies. You cannot design an experiment to check whether your experimental designs are free, because if they are not free, then the experiment itself is compromised. The circle is complete, closed, perfect, logically airtight, epistemically impenetrable, undecidable from within. Now, the block universe. This is where the question of free will becomes not just philosophical, but geometric, not just abstract, but physical, where your fate is not written in a book, but inscribed in the shape of space-time itself. Einstein's general relativity describes the universe as a four-dimensional manifold, space-time, 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time woven together into a single geometric structure. In this structure, time is not fundamentally different from space. Time is a direction, just as north is a direction, and up is a direction, time is a direction. And just as all spatial positions exist simultaneously in a 3-dimensional map, all temporal positions exist simultaneously in the 4-dimensional manifold. The past exists, the present exists, the future exists, all at once, all simultaneously, all equally real. This is the block universe. Imagine your life as a line in 4-dimensional space-time, a world line. Your birth is one end of the line, your death is the other end. Every moment between them is a point on the line, and all the points exist, now, always, simultaneously. Your 10th birthday exists in the block as a specific configuration of atoms at a specific location in space-time. Your wedding day exists. The moment you first saw your child exists. The moment of your death exists. The argument you will have next Tuesday exists. The thought you will think tomorrow morning exists. The decision you will make next year exists. All of it laid out in the 4-dimensional geometry of space-time. Complete, finished, eternal, not going to be finished, already finished, not waiting to happen, already happened, already happening, always happening. The distinction between already and will be is a distinction consciousness makes. Space-time does not make it. In the block universe, time does not flow. Nothing moves from past to future. There is no river of time carrying you from birth to death. The appearance of flow is an illusion produced by consciousness. By the way, your brain processes the geometric structure. You experience the block one slice at a time, one moment after another, like a projector showing a film one frame at a time. And the sequential experience creates the illusion of flow, of change, of becoming, of openness, of possibility. But the film is already shot. The block does not change. The block is. Eternally, completely, all at once. Your future is as fixed as your past, as real as your past, as determined as your past, as unchangeable as your past. Because in the block, there is no difference between past and future. Both are directions in the geometry. Both exist. Both are already there. The arrow of time is psychological, not physical. Physical time does not flow. Physical time simply extends, like a road. The road does not move under you. You move along the road, or rather consciousness moves along the world line. And the world line is already there, complete, from birth to death. Every curve, every turn, every intersection already present in the geometry. Hermann Weyl, the mathematician and physicist who made foundational contributions to general relativity and quantum mechanics, said it with poetic precision. The objective world simply is. It does not happen. Only to the gaze of my consciousness, crawling upward along the lifeline of my body, does a section of this world come to life as a fleeting image in space which continuously changes in time. Read that again. The world does not happen. The world is. Your experience of happening is the crawling of consciousness along a line that already exists in its entirety, already complete, already determined, already there. The movie is already filmed. Every scene, every line of dialogue, every plot twist, every ending, you are watching it one frame at a time and mistaking the viewing for the making, mistaking the reading for the writing, mistaking the experience of the story for the creation of the story. Einstein believed this, deeply, personally, not just as physics but as metaphysics, as the true nature of reality. When his lifelong friend Michele Besso died in March 1955, just weeks before Einstein's own death, Einstein wrote a letter to Besso's family that reveals how seriously he took the block universe. He said, "Now Besso has departed from this strange world a little ahead of me. That signifies nothing. For us believing physicists, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. For us believing physicists, Einstein did not say this as metaphor, did not say it as comfort, did not say it as philosophical speculation. He said it as physics, as the implication of his own theory, as what relativity teaches about the nature of time. Besso was not gone. Besso existed in the block, in the region of space-time where Besso's life was. That region still existed, still exists, will always exist. Besso's death did not remove him from the block any more than walking north removes the south from existence. The south still exists. You are just not there anymore. Besso still exists in his region of the block, and Einstein still exists in his region, and you still exist in yours. And the distinction between being alive now and being dead later is a distinction made by consciousness crawling along a world line, not by physics, not by reality, by the gaze of awareness moving through a structure that does not move. What does this mean for free will? Everything. If the block universe is correct, then your future already exists. Your decisions already exist. The choice you will make tomorrow already exists in the block, as surely as the choice you made yesterday. Nothing is open, nothing is undecided, nothing is waiting for your will to determine it. The entire four-dimensional geometry is complete, has always been complete, will always be complete. Your feeling of deciding is the crawling of consciousness along a world line that was always there. You are not writing the story, you are reading the story. And the story is already written, written not by God, not by karma, not by fate in any personal or purposeful sense, written by geometry, by the mathematical structure of space-time, by the shape of the block. And here is what connects the block universe to theology in a way that should make you stop breathing for a moment. The block universe is al-law al-mahfuz, is the preserved tablet, is the book in which everything is written before it happens, is the Akashic record, is the mind of God that contains all of time in a single eternal now. The theological traditions said reality is a book written before creation. Physics says reality is a block in which all times coexist. The theological traditions said God sees past, present, and future simultaneously. Physics says all of space-time exists simultaneously. The theological traditions said your fate is fixed, written in divine script before you were born. Physics says Your world line is fixed, inscribed in the geometry of space-time before your birth. The language is different. The structure is identical. The preserved tablet and the block universe are the same concept expressed in different vocabularies. One revealed to prophets in caves and temples, the other derived by physicists in offices and laboratories. Same structure, same conclusion, same terrifying implication. Your life is already written. Aquinas understood this 8 centuries ago. He said God does not foresee the future, God sees the future, because God exists outside time. For God there is no past, present, or future. There is only eternal now, the totem simul, the simultaneous whole. God sees all of time the way you see all of a painting, not sequentially, all at once, every moment equally present, every choice equally visible, every birth and every death and every thought and every prayer, all visible to God in a single act of eternal perception. And this is exactly what the block universe describes: a simultaneous whole, a totem simul, a structure in which all times exist equally, in which nothing flows, in which everything simply is. Aquinas arrived at the block universe through theology. Einstein arrived at it through physics. Same destination, different vehicles, same landscape seen from different hills. And just as the theological traditions faced the paradox of predetermined fate and genuine responsibility, physics faces the same paradox with the block universe. If your future already exists, how can your choices be real? If the geometry is fixed, how can your will be free? If the block is eternal, how can anything be open? If the film is already shot, how can the characters improvise? The paradox is the same paradox theologians have wrestled with since the concept of omniscience was first articulated. If God already knows what you will do, then what you will do is already fixed. If the future is already known, then the future is already determined. If determination precludes freedom, then knowing the future precludes freedom. And if God does not know the future, then God is not omniscient. Theology must choose between divine omniscience and human freedom. Physics must choose between the block universe and genuine choice. Both face the same impossible decision. Both refuse to make it. Both hold both sides of the contradiction simultaneously. Both call it mystery. And yet you make choices, or you experience making choices. Right now, in this moment, you could stop reading. You could continue. You could close your eyes and think about something entirely different. You feel the openness, the possibility, the branching paths ahead of you, the sense that the next moment is not yet written, that the future is a blank page waiting for your pen. And this feeling is the most real thing in your experience, more real than any equation, more undeniable than any theorem, more present than any philosophical argument, more certain than the block universe or superdeterminism or anything physics has ever proposed. You are choosing right now, or you feel like you are choosing. And the feeling is so real, so immediate, so undeniable, that rejecting it requires rejecting the most direct evidence you have about anything, the evidence of your own experience, the testimony of your own consciousness. The thing that Descartes said was the one thing you cannot doubt. I think, therefore I am. I choose, therefore I am free. Unless thinking is determined, unless choosing is illusion, unless even the certainty of freedom is the finest product of the machine that denies it. The question of which is true, whether the choosing is real or the feeling is illusion, is the question that neither physics, nor theology, nor philosophy has answered in 4,000 years of asking. The oldest open question in human intellectual history, older than the question of God, older than the question of death, older than every question except perhaps the question of why there is something rather than nothing. and it might be connected to that question. Because if there is a reason the universe exists, then perhaps there is a reason you are free. And if there is no reason the universe exists, then perhaps there is no reason you feel free. The question of free will is the question of the universe, always has been. In part 3, we ask whether quantum mechanics itself offers a way out, whether the many worlds interpretation creates genuine branching that dissolves the block into a tree, whether the wave function gives your choices a reality that determinism denies, whether the observer, the conscious entity that collapses possibilities into actualities, has a freedom that the equations do not capture, but that the equations require. And we ask the theological question directly. Did God design a universe without free will? Did God create beings who feel free but are not? Is the feeling of freedom itself the divine gift, even if the freedom is not real? Or did God build free will into the quantum mechanics through a mechanism that physics has not yet discovered, a mechanism that operates in the gap between the determined and the random, a mechanism that is neither clockwork nor dice but something else entirely, something that the equations point toward but cannot name, something that theology calls soul and physics calls the hard problem and you call I? The question of free will is the question of God, always has been, always will be. Because a God who creates beings without freedom is a God who plays both sides of the chessboard, who writes the script and then judges the actors for following it, who determines the sin and then punishes the sinner. And a God who grants genuine freedom is a God who risks everything, who creates something that can defy the creator, who builds a universe that can say no to the one who built it, who gives away control, who makes room for the other, who loves enough to let go. Which God designed quantum mechanics? The chess player or the risk taker, the controller or the liberator, the determiner or the emancipator? The answer might be hidden in the equations, and the equations might not be willing to reveal it. The block universe says your future already exists. Superdeterminism says even your investigation of whether your future exists is predetermined. Classical physics says you are a machine. Neuroscience says your brain decides before you know. Every direction you look, the walls close in. Every argument you examine eliminates another escape route. The prison of determinism seems total, inescapable, sealed from every side. Determinism says one future exists, and it is fixed. Randomness says the future is unfixed, but you did not choose it. Superdeterminism says you cannot even investigate whether you chose it. The block universe says asking about the future is confused because the future already exists, the way the past already exists. Neuroscience says the feeling of choosing is generated after the choice is made. 5 different arguments from 5 different fields converging on the same devastating conclusion. You are not free, cannot be free. The concept of freedom does not survive contact with physics. But there is one interpretation of quantum mechanics that breaks the block, that shatters the prison, that takes the frozen geometry of space-time and splits it into an infinite tree of branching possibilities. An interpretation where your choices are not just real, but world-creating, where every decision does not merely select one future, but creates all futures simultaneously, where you do not choose between options, you take all of them, where free will is not preserved by making one path real. Free will is preserved by making every path real. Many worlds. Hugh Everett proposed it in 1957, his doctoral thesis at Princeton, the most radical idea in the history of physics, proposed by a graduate student. The idea is simple in statement and vertigo-inducing in implication. The wave function never collapses. Superposition never ends. When you measure a particle that is in superposition of spin up and spin down, you do not force the particle to choose. The universe splits. In one branch you see spin up, in another branch you see spin down. Both outcomes happen, both are real. Both branches contain a version of you, each certain they saw a single, definite result, each unaware of the other, each experiencing a universe that looks classical and definite, neither knowing that the other exists. Now apply this to the block universe. In many worlds, the block is not a single four-dimensional structure. It is a branching four-dimensional structure, a tree, not a line. Every quantum event creates new branches, and quantum events happen constantly. In every atom, in every molecule, in every neuron, trillions of times per second. The block is not a frozen river, it is a frozen delta, an infinite branching network of world lines, each representing a different history of the universe, different outcomes, different measurements, different choices. And here is where it becomes personal, deeply personal, uncomfortably personal. Every decision you make involves quantum events in your brain, not metaphorically, physically. The neurons that fire to produce your decision depend on molecular processes that depend on quantum events. The sodium ions that cross your neural membranes travel through ion channels whose gating depends on protein conformational changes that are quantum mechanical processes. The neurotransmitters that bind to receptors do so through quantum tunneling and molecular recognition that involves quantum effects. The protein conformational changes that determine synaptic strength, the basis of learning and memory, involve quantum mechanical bond rotations. All of these involve quantum mechanical processes. And in many worlds, every quantum outcome is realized. Every possible neural firing pattern occurs in some branch. Every possible thought is thought in some branch. Every possible decision is made in some branch. Every possible version of your life plays out in some branch of the universal wave function. You did not choose this video over another video. You chose both. In this branch, you are watching this video. In another branch, you are watching something else. In another branch, you closed your laptop and went for a walk. In another branch, you never saw the thumbnail because a quantum event in your optic nerve caused you to blink at the wrong moment. In another branch, you do not exist because a quantum event during your conception produced a different person entirely. Every possibility realized, every choice enacted, every path taken, every path not taken also taken. The tree of your life is not a single line of decisions stretching from birth to death. It is an infinitely branching structure where every node, every moment of apparent choice, every quantum event in every neuron produces new branches where each option is simultaneously realized. You are not one person making one series of choices. You are an infinity of people making every possible series of choices simultaneously. All of them you, all of them real, all of them experiencing themselves as the only one, all of them convinced they chose freely. Does this save free will? On the surface it seems to. The block universe denies freedom because the future is fixed. One world line, one path, no alternatives. But in many worlds there are infinite alternatives. Every alternative is realized. The future is not one fixed path, but an infinite branching tree of paths. This looks like freedom. This looks like every choice mattering, because every choice creates a new branch of reality. This looks like the opposite of determinism. Determinism says only one future exists. Many worlds says all futures exist. But look closer. Many worlds does not say you choose which branch you end up in. You do not choose. The wave function evolves according to the Schrödinger equation, deterministically. The branching is determined by the mathematics. Which branch contains which outcome is determined by the quantum state. Your experience of being in one particular branch is determined by the branch you are in. You did not choose this branch. The wave function put you here. You did not choose the other branches either. The wave function put other versions of you there. Nobody chose. The wave function evolved deterministically, and the deterministic evolution produced the branching, and the branching produced the illusion of choice. In every branch, a version of you feels like they chose. In every branch, a version of you is certain their decision was free. In every branch, the feeling of freedom is produced by the same deterministic wave function that produced every other branch, where a different version of you feels equally free about a different decision. Many worlds does not say free will. Many worlds multiplies the illusion of free will across infinite branches. Every branch contains a version of you who feels free. No branch contains a version of you who is free. The wave function is deterministic. The branching is deterministic. The Schrödinger equation that governs the evolution is as deterministic as Newton's equations. More deterministic because it never breaks, never collapses, never introduces randomness. It just branches, deterministically. The experience of freedom is the feeling of being in one particular branch of a deterministic process. Not different from the clockwork universe in any fundamental way. Worse in some ways, because in the clockwork universe at least there is one you making one series of decisions that feel free. In many worlds, there are infinite versions of you, each making a different decision, each feeling free, none of them free, each convinced they are the one who chose, each wrong. The prison has not been broken. The prison has been duplicated infinitely. And in every copy of the prison, every prisoner celebrates their freedom while the walls stand exactly as firm as they ever did. David Deutsch, the physicist who champions many worlds, argues that branching is freedom, that the existence of branches where you made different choices is what free will means. That free will is not about some magical capacity to override physics, but about the physical reality of branching. You are free because every option you could have taken was taken in some branch. Freedom is realized in the totality of branches, not in any single branch. But this is not what freedom feels like, not what freedom means in the way that matters. When you agonize over a decision, when you weigh options, when you feel the weight of choosing and the responsibility of having chosen, you are not comforted by the thought that another version of you chose differently in another branch. Your freedom matters to you because you experience being in this branch, making this choice, bearing these consequences. The you in the other branch is not you, is a different person with different memories accumulated since the branching. Your freedom must be real here, in this branch, in this life, in this experience, or it is not real at all. Distributed freedom across infinite branches is not freedom. It is the absence of freedom disguised as abundance, unless consciousness is different, unless the observer has a role that the wave function does not capture, unless the thing that makes you aware, the thing that produces the first-person experience of being in this branch rather than that branch, is not described by the Schrödinger equation, is not part of the deterministic evolution, is something else, something that the mathematics points to but does not contain, something that chooses which branch to experience, something that is genuinely free, not because the physics is undetermined, but because the consciousness that experiences the physics operates by different rules, rules that no equation has captured, rules that no experiment has detected, rules that might not be physical at all. This is the hypothesis that connects free will to the measurement problem. The reason quantum mechanics has a measurement problem is that the Schrödinger equation does not describe what happens when a measurement occurs. It describes the evolution of the wave function between measurements perfectly, deterministically, precisely. But when measurement happens, something occurs that the equation does not capture. In Copenhagen, the wave function collapses. In many worlds, the universe branches. In both cases, something happens at the moment of observation that the mathematics does not fully describe. And the something involves the observer, involves consciousness, involves the entity that experiences the result. What if free will lives there, in the gap between the deterministic evolution of the wave function and the moment of observation? What if consciousness is the variable that the equations are missing? The hidden variable that Bell's theorem could not rule out because it is not a physical variable at all? What if the reason the measurement problem is unsolved after 90 years of the most brilliant minds in history working on it is that it requires an ingredient that physics does not have? An ingredient that no physical theory contains? An ingredient called choice? An ingredient called will? An ingredient called the capacity of a conscious agent to do something that is neither determined by prior physical causes nor random quantum dice, but genuinely chosen from within by something that experiences the choosing? Roger Penrose has suggested something along these lines. Not that consciousness overrides physics, but that consciousness operates at a level where current physics is incomplete. That the collapse of the wave function involves physics we do not yet understand. Physics that connects gravity to quantum mechanics. Physics that involves Planck scale processes at the boundary between the quantum and the classical. Physics that might include a role for consciousness not as mystical intruder, but as fundamental participant. As something the complete theory of physics will need to include, not as afterthought, as ingredient. This is not mainstream physics. This is speculative, controversial. Many physicists would reject it as mysticism smuggled into science, as wishful thinking dressed in equations, as the desperate attempt of conscious beings to preserve their specialness in a universe that keeps telling them they are not special. And the criticism has force. The history of science is the history of humans discovering they are less central than they thought. Earth is not the center. Humans are not specially created. Consciousness might not be special either. Might be just another physical process fully described by physics, fully determined by equations, fully captured by the Schrödinger evolution. The criticism has force. But consider the alternative. The alternative is that consciousness has no causal power, that your experience of choosing is epiphenomenal, a shadow cast by the machine, a glow emitted by the clockwork. Real as experience but powerless as cause. Your will exists but does nothing. Your choices feel real but change nothing. You are aware but your awareness is passenger, not driver, observer, not participant, audience, not author. And this alternative has a problem, a deep problem that materialist philosophy has never solved. The problem of epiphenomenalism. If consciousness has no causal power, then why does it exist? Evolution produces features that have function. Eyes exist because seeing provides survival advantage. Hearts exist because pumping blood provides survival advantage. Wings exist because flying provides survival advantage. Every complex biological feature exists because it does something, because it provides an advantage. Because organisms that had it survived and reproduced better than organisms that did not. This is the iron law of natural selection. No function, no feature, no advantage, no adaptation. If consciousness does not cause behavior, then consciousness provides no survival advantage. If your experience of choosing does not influence what you do, then your experience of choosing was not selected for by evolution, was not produced by natural selection, was not shaped by the pressures that shaped everything else about you. Consciousness without causal power is evolutionary miracle, an impossible extravagance, the most complex phenomenon in the known universe, produced by a process that only produces functional features, produced without function, an eye that does not see, a wing that does not fly, a heart that does not pump. This makes no evolutionary sense. The existence of consciousness is evidence that consciousness does something, is not just the glow of the machine, is not just the shadow of the clockwork, is not just the narration of a story already written. Consciousness participates, consciousness contributes, consciousness causes, or consciousness should not exist, and consciousness exists, undeniably, irrefutably, the most certain fact you know, therefore consciousness causes. Therefore consciousness is not epiphenomenal. Therefore the materialist dismissal of free will as illusion has a problem it cannot solve, without explaining why evolution produced an elaborate illusion that serves no function in an organism whose every other feature exists, because it serves a function. And if consciousness causes, then consciousness might choose, might exert causal influence on the quantum events in the brain, might be the variable that collapses the wave function, might be the thing that makes the difference between one neural firing pattern and another, not determined, not random, chosen by the conscious agent, by you, by the thing behind your eyes that experiences and decides and acts, the thing that no equation captures, the thing that the measurement problem is about. Now hear what theology says about this, because theology has been arguing about this exact structure for millennia, under different names, in different languages, but the same structure. Al-Ash'ari, the great Islamic theologian of the 10th century, proposed a solution to the paradox of divine decree and human responsibility that maps onto the quantum measurement problem with extraordinary precision, a solution that has been debated for 1,000 years and never surpassed. He called it kasb, acquisition. The concept is subtle, demanding, requires you to hold two things simultaneously. God creates all actions. Every event, every movement, every breath, every quantum fluctuation, every neural firing is created by God. This is divine decree. Qadar, total, complete, absolute. Everything is determined by God. Nothing escapes God's creative act. Nothing happens outside God's will. This sounds like superdeterminism. Sounds like the block universe. Sounds like the total elimination of human freedom. But Al-Ash'ari says the human being acquires the action through will, kasb, acquisition. The human being does not create the action. God creates the action. The human being wills the action. And the willing is real. The willing is not illusion. The willing is the human being's genuine contribution to a process that God ultimately controls. The human being does not determine what happens. God determines what happens. The human being determines their relationship to what happens, their intention, their acceptance, their engagement, their moral quality in the moment of the action. God creates the movement of the arm that strikes. The human being provides the intention to strike in anger or injustice. The physical act is God's. The moral quality is the human's, both real, both operating simultaneously, both aspects of a single event. Think about what this means in quantum terms. God creates the quantum event. The wave function evolves according to God's equations. The probabilities are God's design. The outcomes are God's creation, deterministic at the level of divine will. But the conscious observer acquires the observation through awareness, through measurement, through the act of experiencing one outcome rather than another, through bringing consciousness to the determined event. The acquisition is real, is genuine. Is the observer's contribution, is the kasb the conscious engagement with the quantum event? Is free will operating not at the level of creating the options, not at the level of determining the outcomes, but at the level of being present to the outcome, of experiencing the collapse, of bringing consciousness to the moment where possibility becomes actuality. Kasb is the measurement problem solved theologically. The wave function is God's deterministic creation. The collapse is human acquisition, both real, both necessary, both operating at different levels of the same process, both aspects of a single reality that is simultaneously determined and free, simultaneously divine decree and human choice, simultaneously physics and experience. Maimonides, the greatest Jewish philosopher, confronted the same paradox and arrived at a structure that anticipates modern complementarity with breathtaking precision. In the Mishneh Torah, he presents the problem with characteristic clarity. If God knows the future, then the future is certain. If the future is certain, then human choice is illusion. If human choice is illusion, then reward and punishment are unjust. If reward and punishment are unjust, then the Torah is meaningless. The logic seems airtight. Divine omniscience destroys human freedom, destroys moral responsibility, destroys the entire religious framework. Maimonides' response is not to deny any premise. He denies the framework. He says God's knowledge is not like human knowledge. When you know something, your knowledge is separate from the thing known. You are subject and the known is object. Your knowledge does not change the thing you know. Your knowledge of a sunset does not alter the sunset. But when God knows something, God's knowledge and the thing known are one. There is no separation between God knowing and the thing known. God's knowledge of your future choice is not observation of your choice from outside. It is participation in your choice from within. They are aspects of the same divine act. Your choosing and God's knowing are not two events in sequence. First God knows, then you choose, or first you choose, then God knows. They are one event seen from two perspectives. From your perspective, you choose freely in real time with genuine openness and real consequences. From God's perspective, the choice was always known, always present in the eternal now. Both perspectives are true. Neither negates the other. Neither reduces to the other. The contradiction is apparent, not real. The paradox arises from trying to see one reality from two perspectives simultaneously and demanding they be identical. They are not identical. They are complementary. This is complementarity, Bohr's deepest principle applied to free will. Your choice is both determined and free, both fated and genuine, both written in the preserved tablet and experienced as open possibility. Both descriptions are true. Neither is complete without the other. The wave and the particle again. God's knowing and your choosing are complementary descriptions of a single event, not contradictory, complementary, both necessary, neither sufficient alone. And the Hindu tradition offers perhaps the most practical resolution, karma yoga, the path of selfless action described in the Bhagavad Gita, the most influential text in Hindu philosophy. The setting is a battlefield. Arjuna, the warrior prince, stands between two armies, his own family divided. Brothers, cousins, teachers on both sides. He must fight. The battle is determined. The cosmic order demands it. Dharma requires it. Karma has brought him to this moment. He did not choose to be here. The accumulated weight of countless lifetimes placed him on this battlefield facing this impossible situation. He is not free to leave, not free to avoid the battle, not free to change the cosmic circumstances that created the conflict. But Krishna, God incarnate, standing beside him as his charioteer, tells him something extraordinary. You have the right to action, but never to the fruits of action. Act, choose, decide, fight. But do not be attached to the outcome. The outcome is not yours. The outcome belongs to the cosmic order, to Dharma, to the unfolding of karma that stretches across lifetimes beyond your control. Your freedom is not freedom of outcome. You cannot choose whether to win or lose. You cannot choose whether to live or die. You cannot choose the consequences of your actions, because the consequences are determined by a web of causation that extends infinitely in every direction. But you can choose how you fight, with honor or cowardice, with compassion or cruelty, with full presence or distracted avoidance, with detachment from outcome or desperate grasping at result. The choice that matters is not the choice of what happens. The choice that matters is the choice of how you meet what happens. The quality of consciousness you bring to determined events, the attitude of awareness within the machinery of fate, the stance of the soul inside the clockwork of karma. This is compatibilism expressed 3,000 years before Western philosophy named it. Compatibilism, the philosophical position that free will and determinism are compatible, that you can be meaningfully free even in a determined universe, not free to change the outcomes, free to choose your relationship to the outcomes, free to decide how you face what happens, free to determine the quality of your consciousness even if you cannot determine the content of your experience, free in the way that matters, in the way that defines character, in the way that distinguishes the noble person from the base person, in the way that distinguishes courage from cowardice and compassion from cruelty, not by what happens to them, but by how they respond, by the choice that exists inside the determined event, the choice of awareness, of attention, of intention, of the stance consciousness takes toward the reality it finds itself in. This is the freedom that survives determinism, the freedom that exists inside the block universe, the freedom that operates within the clockwork, not the freedom to change the machine, the freedom to be conscious of the machine. And consciousness of the machine is something the machine itself cannot explain. And perhaps this is what the quantum measurement problem is describing at the physical level. Perhaps this is what the equations are trying to tell us, and failing, because the equations do not have the vocabulary. Not that consciousness determines which outcome occurs. The probabilities handle that. Not that consciousness creates the options. The wave function handles that. But that consciousness determines something else. Something the equations do not capture. Something that is neither the outcome nor the probability, but the experience of the outcome, the meaning of the outcome, the significance of the outcome for a being that is aware. The difference between a quantum event witnessed by a Geiger counter and a quantum event witnessed by a human being. The counter registers. The human experiences, the counter records information, the human lives the information, the counter is part of the machine, the human is conscious of the machine. And this consciousness, this awareness, this experience might be where freedom lives. Not in the outcome, in the experiencing of the outcome, not in what happens, in what it is like for something to happen to someone who is aware. Free will is not the power to change what happens. Free will is the power to be present to what happens, to experience it, to interpret it, to respond to it with awareness rather than automaticity, to bring consciousness to the determined events of a universe that might be clockwork, but that contains within the clockwork something that the clockwork did not create and cannot capture and does not explain and might not even be able to describe, something that the equations point to but cannot contain, something that the measurement problem requires but cannot specify, something that every religious tradition affirms and no scientific theory has captured. You, your awareness, your experience, the thing behind your eyes that watches the clockwork turn and knows it is watching, that is aware of the machine and therefore is not reducible to the machine. Because the machine does not know it is a machine, but you know. And the knowing might be the freedom, the only freedom, the freedom that matters. In part 4, we bring everything together: the quantum mechanics and the neuroscience and the theology and the philosophy, the determinism and the randomness and the superdeterminism and the block universe and the many worlds and the measurement problem, all of it converging on a single question. Not whether free will exists in the way philosophy traditionally asks, but what free will means, what it means for a being made of determined atoms to experience freedom, what it means for a universe that might be a block to contain consciousness that experiences flow, what it means for a creation that might be written to contain characters that feel like they are writing, what it means for a machine to be aware that it is a machine. And we ask whether the feeling itself, the experience of choosing the sensation of freedom, the undeniable first-person reality of deciding, is not the illusion, but the deepest truth, whether consciousness does not merely experience freedom, but is freedom, whether the measurement problem is not just unsolved physics, but the universe's way of telling us that something exists that the equations cannot contain, something free, something aware, something that operates in the gap between determined and random, something that is neither clockwork nor dice, but a third thing that no equation has named. Something that theology calls soul and philosophy calls agent and neuroscience calls the hard problem and physics calls the measurement problem, and you call I, the thing behind the eyes, the awareness inside the atoms, the freedom inside the fate, the choice inside the mechanism, the you inside the universe that might or might not have room for you. Let me tell you what we know, what we actually know, after 4 parts, after the physics and the neuroscience and the theology and the philosophy, after the determinism and the randomness and the superdeterminism and the block universe and many worlds and the measurement problem, after all of it, here is what we know. We know that classical physics is deterministic, that Newton's equations, given initial conditions, produce exact predictions for all future states, that Laplace's demon is the logical consequence, that if the universe were purely classical, your future would be fixed. We know that quantum mechanics introduces indeterminacy, that the Heisenberg uncertainty principle prevents simultaneous knowledge of position and momentum, that the wave function evolves deterministically but measurement produces probabilistic outcomes, that the clockwork is broken at the fundamental level. We know that indeterminacy is not freedom, that replacing determinism with randomness does not give you free will, that a dice roll is not a choice, that quantum uncertainty in your neurons does not mean you chose. It means the universe rolled dice in your skull and you narrated the result as decision. We know that neuroscience shows brain activity preceding conscious awareness of decisions, that Libet found 350 milliseconds, that soon found 10 seconds, that the brain initiates before the mind reports, that the sequence is not I decide then, my brain acts, but my brain acts then I feel like I decided. We know that superdeterminism is logically possible and empirically untestable, that it would make the universe a conspiracy against self-knowledge, that it would close every epistemological escape hatch, that most physicists reject it not because it is wrong, but because accepting it would make science impossible. We know that the Conway-Kochen theorem proves freedom is shared between particles and experimenters, that if one is free, both are free, that if one is determined, both are determined, that the theorem depends on measurement independence, which is exactly what superdeterminism denies. We know that the block universe implies all times exist simultaneously, that Einstein believed it, that Whale described it, that Aquinas intuited it, that the preserved tablet and the block universe are structurally identical, that your future exists in the geometry of space-time as surely as your past. We know that many worlds produces all outcomes in all branches, that branching is deterministic, that the freedom it offers is distributed across infinite copies of you, none of whom chose their branch, that the prison is multiplied, not broken. We know that every major theological tradition affirms both fate and freedom simultaneously. That Islam says qadar and responsibility. That Christianity says predestination and choice. That Hinduism says karma and dharma. That Judaism says divine omniscience and human accountability. That every tradition holds the contradiction without resolving it. That every tradition calls the contradiction mystery rather than error. That the greatest minds in religious history, Augustine and Aquinas and Al-Ghazali and Maimonides and Shankara and Nagarjuna, all confronted this paradox, and none of them solved it, and all of them insisted that both sides are true. We know all of this, every argument, every experiment, every theorem, every tradition, and none of it answers the question, because the evidence is contradictory. The physics says no. The experience says yes. The equations say determined. The consciousness says free. The neuroscience says illusion. The existence of consciousness says real. Every piece of evidence points in two directions at once. Like a quantum particle in superposition, the question of free will is itself in superposition, both determined and free, both yes and no, both illusion and reality, uncollapsed, undecided, waiting for something to resolve it, waiting for observation, waiting for consciousness to collapse the superposition of the question into a definite answer. And perhaps that is the deepest irony of all. The question of whether consciousness is free can only be answered by consciousness. The observer must observe itself. The measurement must measure the measurer. The experiment must include the experimenter. And every attempt to do this runs into the same circularity that superdeterminism exploits. You cannot step outside yourself to check whether your inside experience of freedom is real. You are inside, permanently, beautifully, tragically, inside. And from inside, freedom is undeniable. And from outside, freedom is unexplainable. Because the question is not what physics says about free will. The question is what you experience when you choose, and what that experience means, and whether the experience is the illusion or the reality. Whether the equations describe what is real and your experience is the shadow, or whether your experience is what is real and the equations are the shadow. Whether the map is more real than the territory, or whether the territory is more real than the map. Here is what I think the evidence points toward. Not with certainty, not with the 12 decimal places of quantum electrodynamics, but with the weight of convergence, with the pressure of multiple independent lines of inquiry all pointing in the same direction. I think consciousness is not epiphenomenal. I think consciousness does something. I think the evolutionary argument is decisive and underappreciated. If consciousness does not cause behavior, then evolution would not have produced it. Natural selection is the most ruthlessly economical process in nature. It does not build cathedrals for decoration. It does not create complexity without function. Every organ, every instinct, every neural circuit exists because it does something that increases survival or reproduction. Eyes see, ears hear, lungs breathe, hearts pump. Each feature earned its existence by doing something useful. Consciousness is the most metabolically expensive feature of the human brain. The brain consumes 20% of the body's energy. Consciousness requires the most complex neural architecture in the known universe. Evolution would not build something this expensive unless it did something, unless it contributed to survival, unless it caused behavior, unless it mattered. But if consciousness causes behavior, then the deterministic picture is incomplete, not wrong, incomplete. The equations describe the physical level correctly. Every atom in your brain obeys the Schrödinger equation. Every ion channel opens and closes according to quantum mechanical probabilities. Every neurotransmitter binds according to molecular forces that are fully described by physics. But the equations do not describe everything. They do not describe the experience of being the brain. They do not describe consciousness. They do not describe the felt quality of choosing. They do not describe what it is like to be you, deliberating, weighing, considering, deciding. They do not describe you. And if you exist and you cause behavior, and the equations do not describe you, then the equations are incomplete. And in the gap between the complete reality and the incomplete equations, something might live. Something that the equations do not capture. Something that the formalism does not contain. Something free. I think the measurement problem is the clue, the biggest clue in all of physics. The clue that has been staring at physicists for 90 years, and that most physicists look away from because the implications are too uncomfortable. The measurement problem says that the Schrödinger equation does not describe what happens when observation occurs. Something else happens. Something the equation does not contain. And that something involves the observer, involves consciousness, involves the entity that experiences. The measurement problem is physics, admitting that its equations do not capture everything. That something exists that the formalism does not describe. And the something that the formalism does not describe is the same something that you experience as choosing, as deciding, as being free. I think al-Ash'ari was right about the structure, even if you disagree about God. The physical events are determined. The quantum evolution proceeds according to the Schrödinger equation. The probabilities are what they are, but the conscious experience of those events, the acquisition, the kasb, is something additional, something the equations do not generate, something that exists at a different level. The level of experience, the level of meaning, the level of what it is like to be you experiencing a determined event, and at that level, freedom might exist, not freedom to change the outcome, freedom to be conscious of the outcome, freedom to experience the outcome, freedom to bring awareness to the determined events of your life, and in that awareness to find something that the determinism did not put there, something you bring, something that is yours, something free. I think Krishna was right about the practical truth. You cannot control the outcomes, cannot determine what happens, cannot override the physics, or rewrite the karma, or reprogram the neurons, but you can choose your stance, can choose how you face what happens, can choose awareness over automaticity, presence over distraction, courage over cowardice, compassion over cruelty. The outcomes are not yours. The quality of your consciousness in the face of those outcomes is yours. This is the freedom that survives every argument against free will. Because this freedom does not require you to change the physics, does not require you to violate the Schrödinger equation, does not require consciousness to override the neural mechanisms. This freedom requires only that consciousness exists, that you are aware, that there is something it is like to be you facing the determined events of your life. And there is, undeniably, irrefutably. The one thing you cannot doubt, consciousness exists. And if consciousness exists, and consciousness is where freedom lives, then freedom exists. Not the freedom to change the clockwork, the freedom to be conscious of the clockwork. And that might be enough, might be everything. But now hear the deeper possibility. The possibility that connects quantum mechanics to theology at the deepest level we have encountered in this series. What if free will is not a property of human beings? What if free will is a property of consciousness itself? What if consciousness is freedom? Not that consciousness has freedom the way a person has a hat, something external attached from outside, but that consciousness is freedom the way water is wet, intrinsically, essentially, by nature. What if the very act of being conscious is the very act of being free? What if awareness itself is the freedom that the equations cannot capture? Consider what consciousness does. Consciousness experiences, but experiencing is not passive. Experiencing involves attention, selection, focus. You are conscious of these words right now, but you are not conscious of the pressure of the chair on your body. You were not until I mentioned it. Now you are. Your attention shifted. Your consciousness selected a new object. You chose what to be aware of, not by overriding physics, by directing attention. And the direction of attention is the most fundamental act of consciousness, the most basic exercise of whatever freedom you have. You can attend to this thought or that thought, this sensation or that sensation, this aspect of reality or that aspect. Attention is selection, selection is choice, and attention happens at a level that the Schrödinger equation does not describe, because the Schrödinger equation describes the evolution of the wave function. It does not describe who is paying attention to the wave function. It does not describe the experience of attending. It does not describe you. William James, the founder of American psychology, recognized this in 1890, over a century ago, before quantum mechanics, before neuroscience, before any of the modern arguments against free will. He said, "The effort of attention is the essential phenomenon of will, not the ability to move your arm, not the capacity to change the world, not the power to override physics or violate natural law. The ability to direct your attention, to choose what to focus on, to select from the buzzing, blooming confusion of experience a single object of awareness and hold it there, against distraction, against habit, against the automatic pull of stimulus and response. This is will. This is freedom. This is the act that makes you an agent rather than a machine. The machine processes everything. You attend to something. The machine responds to all inputs equally. You choose which input to notice. The machine is driven by the loudest signal. You can attend to the quietest whisper. The difference is attention, and attention is consciousness in its most active mode, consciousness choosing its own content, awareness selecting its own object, freedom in its most basic and most undeniable form. Henry Stapp, the physicist at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, has built an entire interpretation of quantum mechanics around this insight. He argues that the quantum Zeno effect, the phenomenon where continuous observation prevents quantum state change, provides the physical mechanism for attention. When you hold attention on a neural pattern, you are performing continuous quantum observation on that pattern, and continuous observation through the Zeno effect stabilizes the pattern, prevents it from decohering, prevents it from being overwhelmed by competing neural activity. Your attention, your conscious effort, literally holds the quantum state in place. The effort of will is quantum observation. The freedom of consciousness is the freedom to choose what to observe, and the observation through Zeno stabilization has physical consequences, changes the brain state, influences behavior, causes, not through magic, through quantum mechanics, through a mechanism that is fully consistent with the Schrödinger equation, but that requires a conscious observer to initiate. The equations describe the stabilization perfectly. The equations do not describe who chooses what to stabilize. That requires consciousness. That requires you. That requires free will. And quantum mechanics says something extraordinary about attention, about observation. about the act of directing consciousness at a quantum system. The act of observation changes the system, collapses the wave function, transforms probability into actuality, possibility into fact. The observer does not passively witness a pre-existing reality. The observer participates in creating reality. Wheeler's participatory universe. The observer and the observed are entangled, connected, mutually defining. You cannot separate what the system does from who is watching. The attention of the observer is part of the physics, not outside the physics, part of it, essential to it. Without the observer, the system remains in superposition. Without attention, reality remains indefinite. Consciousness is not irrelevant to physics. Consciousness is necessary for physics, for the physics to produce definite outcomes, for the equations to connect to reality, for the mathematics to mean anything. If attention is will, and observation is attention directed at quantum systems, and observation changes quantum systems, then will changes quantum systems, not through magic, not through violation of physical law, through the fundamental mechanism of quantum mechanics itself, through measurement, through observation, through the act of consciousness directing its attention at reality, and in so doing, making reality definite. This is not mysticism. This is the measurement problem taken seriously. This is what the equations imply when you do not look away from the implication. And this is what the theological traditions have been saying all along, in different languages, through different concepts, but the same insight. God gave consciousness free will, not free will to override physics, free will to observe, to attend, to be present, to direct the divine spark of awareness at the determined events of creation, and in that direction to participate in creation. To be co-creator not through power, but through attention, through the quality of consciousness brought to the moment. Through the kasb, the acquisition, the willing participation in determined events that transforms them from mere physics into lived experience, into meaning, into the stuff of moral life, into the arena where courage and cowardice, compassion and cruelty, love and indifference play out their eternal drama, not by changing what happens, but by determining what happens means to a being who is conscious. Quantum mechanics did not discover that you have no free will. Quantum mechanics discovered something far more subtle and far more important. Quantum mechanics discovered that the boundary between the determined and the free is the boundary between the physical and the conscious. That the equations describe everything up to the moment of observation, and then something else takes over, something that the equations do not contain. Something that 90 years of the most brilliant physics has failed to capture in any formalism. Something that exists in the gap between the wave function and the experience, between the probability and the actuality, between the quantum and the classical, between the determined and the chosen. You are that boundary. Your consciousness is the place where the determined becomes the experienced, where the physical becomes the personal, where the equation becomes the meaning, where fate becomes life. You are the measurement, the observation, the collapse, the moment where possibility becomes actual, and in that moment, something happens that the equations do not describe, something free, something aware, something that theology calls soul, and philosophy calls agent, and physics calls the measurement problem. Something that is you, not your atoms, not your neurons, not your wave function. You, the thing that experiences, the thing that attends, the thing that chooses what to notice in a universe of infinite things to notice, the thing that brings meaning to mechanism, purpose to physics, freedom to fate. Did God design this? Did God create a universe where freedom lives in the gap between the quantum and the classical, where consciousness is the bridge between determination and choice, where the equations are complete for everything except the one thing that matters most, the experience of being alive and making decisions. Did God build the measurement problem into physics as the doorway through which souls enter the determined world and bring freedom with them? Did God create quantum mechanics specifically so that the universe would be determined enough to be lawful and orderly and predictable and scientific, and simultaneously undetermined enough at the point of observation to allow consciousness to participate, to choose, to be free? Because if you were God and you wanted to create beings who are genuinely free, you would face an engineering problem. You need the universe to be lawful. Without laws, there is no structure, no atoms, no molecules, no brains, no beings. Without determinism, there is no reliability, no predictability, no science, no technology, no civilization. You need the clockwork. But you also need freedom. You need the beings to have genuine choice, genuine will, genuine responsibility. You need the clockwork to contain something that is not clockwork, something that is not determined, something free. How do you solve this? You build quantum mechanics. You build a universe that is deterministic at every level except one, the level of observation, the level of consciousness. The level where awareness meets matter. At that boundary, and only at that boundary, you introduce indeterminacy, not randomness, something the equations cannot describe, something that requires a conscious observer, something that the mathematics points to but cannot capture. You build the measurement problem into the foundations of physics, not as a flaw, as a feature, as the door through which freedom enters the determined world, as the gap in the clockwork where consciousness lives, as the space between the equation and the experience where the soul operates. This is speculation, beautiful speculation, unfalsifiable speculation, theology dressed in physics, dressed in philosophy, dressed in the deepest longing of conscious beings who want to be free. But it is consistent with everything we know about quantum mechanics, consistent with everything we know about consciousness, consistent with every theological tradition that affirms both divine sovereignty and human freedom. And it is the only framework that accounts for all the evidence, the determinism of the equations, the indeterminacy of measurement, the causality of consciousness, the experience of freedom, the insistence of every tradition that both fate and freedom are real. Or is this all naturalistic? Is consciousness simply what complex information processing feels like from the inside? Is the measurement problem just an unsolved physics problem that will eventually be solved without any reference to freedom or consciousness or God? Is the feeling of choosing just the most elaborate product of a deterministic machine that feels free because the machine is too complex to see its own determinism? I do not know. Neither do you. Neither does anyone. The question of free will remains open, has been open for 4,000 years, will probably remain open for 4,000 more. Because the question is not a physics question that better experiments will solve, not a philosophy question that better arguments will settle, not a theology question that better revelation will answer. The question of free will is the question of consciousness. And consciousness is the one thing that every framework describes from outside and that you experience from inside. And the inside and the outside do not match. The outside says determinism. The inside says freedom. The outside says mechanism. The inside says choice. The outside says illusion. The inside says reality. And perhaps this mismatch is the answer. Perhaps the fact that every external description of consciousness eliminates free will, and every internal experience of consciousness affirms it is not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be recognized. The truth that consciousness exists at a different level than the physical. that the internal perspective is not reducible to the external description, that the first-person experience of choosing is as real as the third-person observation of neurons firing, that both are true, both are real. Both describe the same event from different perspectives that cannot be reconciled because they operate at different levels of reality. The neuron fires. This is physics, determined or random, captured by equations, describable from outside. The neuron fires and you experience choosing. This is consciousness, neither determined nor random, not captured by equations, known only from inside. Both happen simultaneously, in the same event, in the same moment, in the same brain. The neuron firing and the experiencing of choosing are aspects of a single reality that is simultaneously physical and conscious, simultaneously determined and free, simultaneously mechanism and meaning. This is the final answer, or the final mystery, depending on which perspective you take. From the outside, the universe is determined. From the inside, you are free. Both are true. Neither is complete. The universe is bigger than any single perspective. Reality contains both the equations and the experience, both the fate and the freedom, both the clockwork and the consciousness that knows it is clockwork, and in knowing transcends the clockwork, not by escaping it, by being aware of it, by experiencing it, by living it with the fullness of consciousness that transforms determined events into meaningful life. You are made of atoms. The atoms are determined, and you are free, not despite being made of atoms, not by overriding the atoms, but because you are conscious, because there is something it is like to be the atoms arranged as you, because the arrangement produces awareness, and awareness produces meaning, and meaning produces the experience of choice, and the experience of choice is the one thing the atoms alone cannot explain. Your fate is written in the block universe, in the preserved tablet, in the karma of countless lifetimes, in the initial conditions of the Big Bang, written, fixed, determined, and you are free. Free to attend, free to be present, free to bring the quality of consciousness to your determined life that transforms mechanism into meaning, free in the way that matters, in the way that defines who you are, not by what happens to you, but by how you are present to what happens, by the attention you bring, by the awareness you cultivate, by the consciousness you direct at the vast, determined unfolding of a universe that contains within its determinism the one thing it cannot determine: you, your awareness, your experience, your freedom. The freedom that lives in the gap between the equation and the experience, the gap between the neuron and the choosing, the gap between the fate and the life, the gap that is you. The pens have been lifted, the pages have dried, the ink is fixed, the story is written in the block universe, in the preserved tablet, in the karma of beginningless time. In the initial conditions of the Big Bang, the story is complete, every page filled, every chapter finished, every sentence fixed. And you, the reader, the experiencer, the consciousness that crawls along the world line of your life, encountering each determined moment, as if for the first time you are free, free to read, free to experience, free to bring meaning to the pages that are already written, free to attend to the story with the fullness of your consciousness, free to weep at the sad parts and laugh at the beautiful parts and gasp at the surprises even though the author finished writing long ago. The story is written and the reading is free, and the reading is everything. Because here is the final secret. The secret that quantum mechanics and theology and philosophy and neuroscience all point toward without any of them quite being able to say it. The story was written for the reader. The block was built for the consciousness that would crawl through it. The equations were designed for the observer who would experience them. The fate was written for the being who would live it freely. The determinism exists so that freedom has something to be free within. The clockwork exists so that consciousness has something to be conscious of. The written story exists so that the reader can bring to it the one thing the writing cannot contain: the experience of reading, the awareness of being in the story, the freedom of attending to one word and then the next, and finding in the determined sequence something that the sequence alone does not possess: meaning, life, the felt quality of existing, the warmth of consciousness in a cold universe of equations. The universe wrote your story, every atom in place, every neuron predetermined, every quantum event already inscribed in the geometry of space-time, the most complete determinism imaginable. And then the universe did something the equations do not explain. The universe produced a reader, produced consciousness, produced you, produced the one thing that can take a determined story and experience it as an adventure, that can take a fixed sequence and live it as a journey, that can take a written fate and read it as a choice. God or physics or whatever name you give to the ground of being wrote the pages, and you read them, and the reading is neither determined nor random. The reading is yours, your attention, your awareness, your consciousness moving through the determined moments of your life and finding in each moment something the determination did not put there. Your experience of it, your presence in it, your freedom within it. The kalemle kalkte, the pens have been lifted, the murakep kurudu, the ink has dried. The story is finished, and you are free. Free to live it, free to experience it, free to bring to every determined moment the one undetermined thing in the universe. Your awareness of being alive,